Hello, this is Angel Michael. I'd like to welcome you to my channel. Today my topic is American church people are lazy, gullible, and immoral. Now, I know that's going to be a very controversial subject, and I might have some people that will be angry by what I have to say, but please listen to everything I'm saying first before you make a comment. Now, why am I calling church people lazy, gullible, and immoral? Well, I want to give you an example of that. I really don't want to talk about a particular person, but to give you an example, I'm actually going to have to use a person's name. There's a pastor who is pretty well known, and I think is probably still well known in some circles. He had a big church in Washington State and worked with a lot of, I'd say, 20-something people, and had a really good church and a good following. And he has a new church now in Phoenix, Arizona. And some people, especially single people, probably would know who Mark Driscoll is. But if you don't, just do a Google search and you'll find out. Well, he had a big church, and I think he had written maybe a couple of books. I don't know all the details because I really don't want to spend a lot of time dwelling on him particularly. But the reason why I have to mention him is because it's a serious problem in churches today. People are not studying the Bible for themselves. They want to be spoon-fed, and they just like little babies, little children. They don't want to do any studying themselves, so they'll choose somebody, and they don't care as long as it's a person who has a personality. I call them cults of personality. He's a good speaker, and it's charismatic personality, and that's all they care about. To draw a crowd of people and be part of their church, which really most of the time these so-called churches are nothing more than social clubs. They're not even a real church. Well, anyway, the reason why I'm mentioning him, and I'm sure there are other people too, but I don't spend my time all day looking up all types of different people. I just happen to know about him personally because I had some run-ins with some of his followers a few years ago on the internet, on Facebook actually. So that's the reason why I know about him. I had to do some research to find out why they were attacking me when I was talking about singleness. This one guy was attacking me, and he didn't like the idea that I was still single, that he thought I should be married, and kept bringing all these scripture verses up, and like, where are you getting all this stuff from? And he happened to be a follower of Mark Driscoll. So that's the reason why I started doing some research on him. And they used to have it, and probably still have some videos. I don't bother looking at him anymore because I don't want to even see the man's face. Because just hearing him talk, just like somebody taking their fingernails and scratching a board. Like when it just gets on my nerves, because a lot of things that he has to say basically is not scriptural, and he's always talking ugly about men. He never says anything that's really bad about women. It's always the guy's fault. And he never says anything good about singleness. It's all about getting them singles in there, getting them married, and having babies so that they can get in there and grow his church, and so he can start making all that money. And that's all he cares about. He's been on television shows. I know he's been on several different shows like The View and talking to Joey Behar and some of the other people on there. So I know he's been on television shows. But, okay, well, now what I have against him, you might ask? Well, personally, I think he's probably, if you knew him personally, he might be an okay person. But everything I keep reading about him is very, very suspicious. And then all of a sudden I read an article from 2014 where he actually was kicked out of his church for several reasons. Well, one was because he had embezzled over $200,000 from his church. I forget the name of the church in Washington State, but if you do a Google search, you could find it. And do a Google search about him being called embezzling funds. And I didn't make this up, and you can look it up for yourself. Over $200,000 because as a writer, he wanted to. I guess he didn't have enough people buying his books, so to make himself feel better about his writing abilities, he decided to embezzle that money from his church so that he could see his name on the New York City's bestseller book list. I mean, if you don't call that arrogant, I don't know what you call it. The guy is it's an egomaniac. I've seen his videos, and the way he likes to yell at people, I'm sorry. I mean, I've been to all different types of churches, and I've had pastors. I've been to churches where pastors, do speak out pretty loud, and that's fine. I mean, it gets the attention and keeps you from going to sleep. But if you are just up there yelling and putting people down for no reason, especially for unbiblical reasons, I have issues with that. I mean, I could go on. I don't want this to be a very long video. But if you do a Google search or do a YouTube search and listen to some of his videos, now you can also get into the fact that a lot of people have complained about the fact that he is a super Calvinist, which means, if you don't know anything about Calvinism, I don't consider myself to be a Calvinist because there are like 5 different areas where Calvinists delve into, but basically most Calvinists believe that in predestination, and they go to the extreme where they claim that some people are predestined for hell, and I do not believe that at all. Not at all. I mean, I know Jesus knows the future, past, present, and future, but he came because to save all people, and we are given a choice, and we have a choice to make whether we want to accept Jesus or not. And he's one of these people that basically wants to just forget about certain people, and of course there's some that are worse than him that don't even believe in going out and witnessing to people because they're like, well, they're predestined to go to hell or not. It's not up to me. How are you supposed to be able to ever get saved if you never hear about the Word of God? You've gotta hear it first. You've got to be a witness to these people. So I don't think he's that extreme. But anyway, not to get into too in depth in some possible doctrinal issues. I haven't really studied that much about that. But the thing that bothers me about not just him, but other pastors, they're especially those that get into this name it, claim it type situation, and they take the scriptures and they twist them, and they try to make you feel like, well, if you give to the church, God's gonna. Yes, God's gonna bless you, but God's not gonna make you a millionaire. You got some of these crazy people on here on these TV shows and these big churches who actually are propagating false doctrines that God is obligated because you give to the church to make you super rich, and that's just not true. And I remember this one pastor. I think his name is Mike Murdoch. Well, the guy is terrible. I mean, I did some research on him as well. He's known to be a womanizer, for one thing. And he was caught in a bar now, he's a pastor, caught in a bar bragging about how he was milking his parishioners out of money. And yeah, he's still a pastor. It's no telling how much money that man makes. So there are plenty, I'm sure there are lots of other pastors the same way out there. Anyway, what a lot of these pastors are doing is that they're telling people, they take certain verses. Let me give you an example of a verse. But there's some verses that talk about, and this is from the Old Testament, where it talks about Elijah, who went to this widow at Zarephath, which is in another country. It wasn't in Israel. Went over the Jordan. I think he was Edom. Well, anyway, he stayed with that particular woman because the Lord told him to. The lady was blessed by letting him stay in his house. She cooked him meals every single day. And the prophet was told by God to tell her that he would not allow her to ever be without any food and water and whatever she needed until after it started to rain. So I think he stayed with her for like a couple of years, maybe 3 years. But anyway, God blessed her, but he didn't make her rich. So these people are taking verses out of context. Yes, God blessed the lady. He gave her what she needed. He didn't give her all this wealth that these people keep talking about. And he's not the only one. I was thinking about another TV show, Pat Robertson's show. I mean, I enjoy some of the stuff they have on there. But he has this crazy idea that God's going to bless you to the point where you don't have to worry about anything ever again. I mean, that's just not true. Now, I have been blessed. The Lord has blessed me. But he hasn't made me rich. You know, I don't know of anybody that the Lord has just made rich from just giving some money to the church. And I've talked to other people about that as well. It's something that he expects us to do, but he's not required because we give a little bit of money to the church to make us rich. So that's an issue I have with these people that have this name it, claim it type situation. It's not biblical. It may be another name for it, but that's the one name I've always heard. But as far as the other pastor, like I was just mentioning earlier about Mark Driscoll, just using him as an example, I'm sure there's others as well. But my question would be, why would a church want to hire somebody like that? You know, for one thing, I really don't know why he's not in jail. If I were a member of that church and the pastor had stolen, embezzled, whatever, stealing's what it is. You know, if you want to use the word embezzling, that's fine. You know, embezzled all that money from the church. I mean, I don't care if it is a rich church. That's a lot of money. I mean, even if you only stole like $30, that's stealing. And he didn't pay it back. I mean, he took it to buy books. You know, to puff himself up instead of... He's supposed to be a pastor who cares about people and about the gospel. But no, he's out there stealing money from his church to help prop up his ego. So yeah, I've got issues with that. And I don't know why any church would ever trust somebody like that again. Sure, I mean, I remember the Bakers from the 80s. And the Baker, well, the wife is no longer with us. She passed away from cancer a few years ago. But Jim Baker has his own ministry again. But at least he got on television and he actually admitted everything that he did, asked for forgiveness from the Lord and the people. And I really truly believe that he's changed. But, you know, whether I would want him as my pastor, no. I've listened to him and I enjoyed hearing some of the things he had to say. But would I trust him? I don't know. I mean, it would have to be so. I would have to be given some direction from the Lord about that. But, you know, why would you hire and trust somebody who is stolen from your church, or from other churches? I'm sorry, but I wouldn't. Now, if he wasn't a pastor, I really don't see how he could ever get a job in another field either. I mean, if you've been caught in an industrial type job or some kind of company, and if you've been caught, in the company stealing, I seriously doubt they would have forgiven you, and you would have gone to jail. I guess they felt sorry for him. I don't know. I really don't know what goes through people's minds. I'm not a vindictive person, but at the same time, I find it very difficult to just say drop at charges when you've stolen that kind of money from the church. That's terrible. You think about it, all those hardworking people, how they work their butts off to give money to the church, and your pastor turns around and steals all that money for his own ego. That's just not right. And I would never trust somebody like that again. And that's another issue that I was saying about the church people. People are way too gullible. And I'm not saying you should never trust people when they've messed up. That's not true. You should give people a chance. But I'm sorry, but when you've done something like this, and this is not the first time that some of these pastors have done this. They've happened several different times, and it's not just that some of them have stolen. That some people have committed, egregious sexual acts, and people have still just accepted them into the church. And it's happened more than once. It's just it's not the right thing to do. You need to find somebody who fits the bill according to the scriptures. If you really want to get down to it, you can't be a novice. The Bible tells you that you're not supposed to be a novice. You're supposed to be a person who gets along with everybody. You're supposed to be able to rule your house well and your family well. You're supposed to be able to take care of the finances. That's not taking care of the finances when you're stealing from the church. That's a lot of these pastors, they have committed adultery or some other type of fornication if they're not married, stolen from the church, lied, cheated, and yet they still have a church. It doesn't make sense to me. The church people are, like I said, are gullible, they're foolish. So the only thing I can figure is that maybe some of these church people are immoral themselves. If you're an immoral person yourself, you have no problems with your pastor being immoral. So it makes me wonder, these church people, if they aren't gullible and foolish, then they must be immoral as well. I guess that means that it's okay, and maybe they steal at work themselves. I don't know. But I can't imagine going to a church where your pastor, who's supposed to be a godly man of God, teaching you how to live right when you know for a fact that he's been out there and he's committed adultery with more than one woman, and he's stolen from other churches, and not to mention there's probably other things that he's done as well. And I would forgive somebody for sins that they've committed in the past, but would I trust them to be my pastor? No, there's no way. If I found out the pastor had done something like that, you know what I would do? Not only would I tell him he's wrong, and the other people that he's wrong, and if I had no power over anything that goes on in the church, and they don't listen to me, you know what I would do? I would leave. I would let people know why I'm leaving, besides the pastor, and I would walk right out the door. I don't want to be any part of any kind of fellowship where the pastor and the other people approve of immorality in the church, the pastor especially being immoral, somebody who spiritually abuses people. Well, these people are spiritual abusers because they are, they're teaching false doctrines. And I've also heard of emotional abuse that goes on in some of these churches. Can you imagine finding out that your pastor is going out and getting drunk at bars and then talking smack about his people, laughing about how he's taking all this money home from all these people while he's out having a good old time with prostitutes. Yeah, there are some pastors I've heard that are doing that. That Mike Murdoch guy, that he's been caught with prostitutes. And yet he still goes back to his church and acts like he's such a saintly man. Everybody praises him like, oh, he's wonderful. No, he's not. He's a worthless piece of crap. And he should not be a pastor. So that to me proves that either one, these people are gullible, or, they obviously are not. They're lazy because they're not studying the Bible for themselves. And another thing is, like I already said, that evidently these people are okay with their pastor being immoral. So I guess they must be immoral too. So, yeah, the reason why I'm getting into this today is because it really makes my blood boil. When I hear, I've got some friends, and including myself, who have tried to get positions in the church. And a friend of mine has been overlooked. He's a good Christian man, and he is definitely qualified. He wants to be in a position in a church, but they will not hire him because they want a female. And according to the scriptures, females are not supposed to be preachers, and they're not supposed to be leaders in the church. I mean, I think they could probably be a deacon, even though I'm not really sure even that's biblical. But they insisted on hiring a female for a paid position, and all he wanted to do was volunteer, and he couldn't even get a volunteer job, and he has a seminary degree. So that was really upsetting, and I think he ended up leaving the church over that, just because he wanted to do a volunteer position. And people were coming to him, and they were actually asking for spiritual help because they knew that he was a good person who followed the scriptures, and he helped people out. They wouldn't even go to the paid personnel of the church because they said that they weren't even interested. They were just there for a paycheck. This one person they hired was a female. She had no interest whatsoever in being a mentor and helping people with their spiritual problems. She was just there to get a paycheck. And she'd spout off verses, and she gave my friend a hard time. And she was trying to kick him out of the church. And besides, of course, he was ready to leave anyway. I think that's a crying shame. Churches have turned into social clubs. They are not there like they're supposed to be there to help people to grow spiritually in the Lord. Basically, people are there in leadership positions are only there to get a paycheck. They do not care about the people. They definitely don't care about whether they're living right or not. Because a lot of these people in these positions are immoral adulterers. A lot of them are thieves and liars. Not to mention the fact that some of them are teaching heretical doctrines. So, my point is that as church people and Christians, that we should be like the ancient Bereans. We should be studying our Bibles for ourselves, not to be spoon-fed by the pastor. The pastor does something wrong, you need to point it out to him. That's biblical. And if there is things that are wrong with the pastor, they need to bring it before the people, first the deacon board, and then the people. And then if the pastor refuses to change what he's doing that's wrong, then he needs to be fired. Or if you're looking for a pastor, you should not hire a pastor who is stolen from another church. I mean, just because a pastor, people felt sorry for him and decided, that they weren't going to put him up on charges and indict him and take him to court or whatnot, I still wouldn't trust him, because stealing is wrong. I mean, I can't believe I actually have to say that. It's terrible. I actually think that people just let their pastor do whatever they want to. And I guess it's just a sign of the times. I mean, the politicians are doing it. Just look at how they're behaving. People keep on hiring these politicians. They're liars. They're thieves. It's just amazing to me. People are just beyond lazy. Apathetic. It's terrible. But anyway, I don't want to continue to rant here. But as Christians, we're supposed to be good stewards of the church. And you're not being a good steward of the church if you hire a pastor who's not worthy. I mean, some of these pastors I read about on the internet, they're not even a Christian as far as I can tell. Because why would a real Christian do some of the things that I mentioned that these people were doing? Why would you go to clubs and hang out with prostitutes and have sex with prostitutes? And why would you steal from the church and then laugh about it and make fun of your church people? It's beyond amazing that they're still pastors, and why they're not in jail, I don't know. But anyway, I just think church people need to take care of the church better than that. And the Lord does not approve of this kind of behavior, and so why should we? And again, like I said earlier, when somebody's done something wrong, a pastor or whoever in the church, you can forgive them, but that still doesn't mean that makes them qualified to be a pastor. Once they've committed that kind of sin and damaged your trust, it's very difficult to get that back. I mean, I'm sorry, but I would have a very difficult time hiring a pastor who is a known felon and who has committed adultery on more than one occasion and who has stolen from other churches. Because you know good and well they would not get a job with a company doing something like that. So why would you trust him in your church? Okay, well anyway, please leave comments if you want. Please be respectful. And remember, I am not trying to bash anybody in particular here. I'm just bringing up some very important points that as church people that we're supposed to live according to the Bible. And yes, we forgive, but at the same time, we're responsible for taking care of church business. And we cannot have people in authority in our church that are committing egregious sins, adultery and stealing and cheating, lying, whatever. Those sins, that just should not be tolerated in the church. You're certainly not going to tolerate it in a company. If you had a company, you wouldn't tolerate it in your company, so why would you tolerate it in the church? Okay, thanks. Have a wonderful day, and God bless you.